Nice to meet you, or nice to meet you again. I'm Cindy, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Alan and Iman. And you might see some of our team as well. There's Asit, there's Pratna and Alan. Oh, sorry, Asit, Pratna, and Anu. And we're excited to have you here. And today we will be walking you through three things. One is just a quick intro on FutureSight and what we do, our focus. Second is a deep dive into one part of our process. And the third is we're going to talk about the six ventures that we're currently building. And at any time, please feel free to send your questions in the chat. And we would really like to see all that conversation happening. So at FutureSight, we co-found and fund vertical B2B AI SaaS companies with values different leader. What this means is that we're your institutional co-founder, and we are your co-founding team building it with you from day zero. And because of that, we are in it for the long term. We do this by applying learnings that we've accumulated over 100 ideas and businesses and turning all of that insight into a systematized process from sourcing the ideas, validating the solution, building the team, funding the companies, and onwards. And next, Alan will walk you through one of the steps we do to ensure we're building the best companies. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Cindy. So we're going to talk about pricing today. This is it's a weird part of the process. It overlaps with so many other ones, but we've tried to segment it down to, a few concepts that I think are going to be super useful for you. There's some things in here that I've learned from industry experts at Simon and Kucher, from Price Intelligently, and various other like directly, from them as well as elsewhere. And I hope some of these ideas, resonate with you and you can use in your own stuff. Or if you partner with us, this is the kind of stuff that we're doing together or we're doing ahead of time as we develop the ideas. So let's jump in. This is really about how to price before you have a product, so it's very early stage. Here at FutureSight, we're trying to build $100 million businesses, right? Things that have a lot of that, headroom, that they have $100 million revenue potential. We don't expect to see $100 million in, 5 years. Like, we're not trying to do a D2, D3 type thing of like tripling, 3 years in a row and then, doubling a couple of times. But there's this famous post that kind of sums this up a long time ago. It's by Christopher Jantz. Throw your hand up or put a message if you remember this, because it's like at least 10 years old. And I remember when I first saw this, I was like kind of shocked. I was like, $100 million business? Really? Like, how audacious is that? And now that's normal around here. That's exactly what we're trying to do every day. But really, there's only, a few ways to build, a $100 million business in B2B. And so we also focus on B2B. So the first is you go enterprise and you're essentially, elephant hunting, where you get some a few $1 million customers essentially, or sorry, I guess they've got maybe one and 1,000 customers. Sorry, 1,000 customers at $1 million each. Pretty easy. Sorry, no, 100 customers. I'm getting it wrong already. It's right here. The second one down is this concept of the deer, right? So you're not hunting something quite as big, but you need more. Like, there's less meat on the bones. If you catch one, you're going to get through it, faster. And the whole like hunting analogy is a little bit weird, but essentially you need 10,000 medium-sized businesses paying you $10,000 per year. Or you can get 100,000 small businesses paying you 1,000-ish or a little bit more, per year. That's really hard to do. And selling enterprise is something we don't really do. So $10,000 is the price. We did it. It's lunchtime. Elizabeth, what else is there to talk about? Actually, there's a lot. So as simple as this chart makes it seem, as soon as you get into the little mouse and the flies here, you're more in a B2C business or an ad-supported business and like platformy type stuff. We don't really do that either. We're talking about B2B businesses in the mid-market. So what do people get wrong here? If it was so easy, everyone would just price at 10,000. But Not every product is priced at 10,000 a year, and there's still tons of $100 million companies. So how do we do this? Um, Most early stage teams, kind of make one of a few mistakes. They just pick a price out of thin air, $10,000 because Christopher Jantz said so, right? Or I think it's worth it. They don't think about the fact that there's usually a small, a medium, and a large price or plan, and those are for different segments of the market. And there may not be 100,000 members of one segment of your market, but there may be 10,000 who can pay a lot more, and it'd be more like a 25 or 50K ACV. Um, a lot of people just blindly copy the competitors. You don't know if your competitor's pricing is working. You just know that that's the pricing they're at. Is it supporting their growth? Is it well accepted by customers? Are they leaving on the money on the table? We don't know. We just know what the price is. Um, a lot of people overcomplicate it early on, and they try to create too many pricing plans and too many tiers and too many add-ons, and like build a hub and spoke model of usage and services and core and before they've sold anything. And we want to stay away from that as well. And the last is you know analysis paralysis, and saying we got to get this right. Pricing is so important, right? And that's kind of the next point, which is um, it's emotionally loaded. You're putting a number on your value, and it feels personal. And for that reason, people wait too long, or they make a lot of these mistakes because they come from a place of emotion, not necessarily from a place of data or market insight. You're navigating all this uncertainty, so why bother? Like, just pick a price and be done with it, right? Um, the reason why not to do that is because pricing is so powerful. I've heard various different ways of describing this, but in the SaaS space from Profitwell, their research showed that pricing is 4 to 8x more impactful than acquisition. That an hour spent in one place versus the other, or a percentage point improvement in pricing is equal to a percentage point improvement somewhere else. It's almost always a bottleneck where if it's improved, everything improves. So that's why we're even going to bother and talk about this today. So, what are we trying to really achieve? If we got pricing right in the early stages, what are we doing? We're matching the buyer's budgets um, to the price that we're selling for. We're not leaving money on the table, and we're actually able to sell them something as opposed to just being way over their budget and not selling anything. We're growing when our customer grows. This is really underrated of, as we find success for them, how are we able to capture more value as we create more value for them? How are we able to capture more value? How do we have better sales conversations um, with and really prove out our ROI to the point where they're looking at the price and they're doing the mental math in their head. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I think I can pay this. Okay, I get it. I see why you've priced it that way," as opposed to objection, 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 objection. And then, lastly, we just want to be able to launch something and learn, and then iterate as quickly as possible. So let's get into it. How do we do this? Our sort of big idea here is that, most founders treat pricing like a decision. Is it this or that? It's more of a system. It's more of a structure. It's more something like you build. And so we put this into a pyramid. It's called the stack pyramid for stacking cash or stacking your pricing learning, whatever you want. It's called the stack pyramid. So it starts with segmentation. Like, you need to know in a market, uh, who are you selling to? What's their size? What is their budget? And how are they ready to buy? If you're, selling to people in logistics, it could be very different in terms of which part of the logistics chain they're in, or it could be very different in terms of who they serve, or it could be very different in terms of where they are, or very different in terms of their customer size, right? So understanding those segments and who you're creating value for is very important. This overlaps with market sizing a lot. The second is understanding the alternatives. So what are they paying for today? Or tracking the alternatives. What are they paying for today? If they're buying a competing product, you do need to know what that price is. If there's some sort of a substitute, oh, they're using something kind of unexpected and it costs them this much time or money. Is there an internal tool, that they've built and are paying to, keep up to date? Um, what is the cost of the spreadsheets or the people that they have hired or the business process outsourcing teams that they have to solve a particular problem for them. If you know all of those, you can start to piece together, what the budget and what the value of solving that problem is based on existing market signals. The next is really aligning to your strategy. So figuring out, is it, are you doing something? And there's only really three strategies here at the end of the day, and we would almost always focus on one, but also aligning on what is the first segment, to go to market to. We'll talk more about these in a minute, but the strategy piece is important. Different prices create a different type of business, even within the same market with the same solution. Next would be crafting the model. So building your first version of the pricing structure, one price, one offer, one clear starting point. And then kicking the tires with customers, getting them to try it out, validating in customer discovery calls, see what's working and what's not working, where are the objections in the early days. You don't need perfect pricing, you just need a starting point you can learn from. So let's keep going. How do we do it? Let's walk through each one of these steps in a little bit more detail. So market segmentation is challenging and not something I knew a lot about before we started doing this. Essentially, we want to do user interviews. We want to do market research to identify these different segments. You can look at size. Again, like I said, let's say we're selling to trucking companies. Most trucking companies are basically like one driver, right? With one truck. That's good to know when you're thinking about, the overall shape of the market. Let's say we're selling to home services companies, but within that, maybe there's a few different types. You could go electricians, HVAC, plumbers. They're all one market, but then there's these segments in between them. Local healthcare services companies. So it could be chiropractors and dental clinicians and whatever. And you're either picking one within that or going a little bit, broader. Tracking the alternative. So then here's an example here of, I can't actually read this example. What did we do here? Oh yeah, so this was in private wealth. We were building something and you can see the work we did to figure out what did these look like, right? These ones are green for a reason because they fit the characteristics of markets that we like to go after. Whereas when we map these ones down here, there's problems with them. Either it's the number of employees, it's how challenging it is to sell into them because they're more, enterprise driven, and our early stage products just aren't going to be able to fly there. Whereas, when we look at this, we can get excited. And so we've color coded this and decided already within this wealth management market, here are the segments that we're most excited about working with. All right, let's keep going. So tracking the alternatives, I'll give you three ways to do this. One is you can track time savings. So let's say, I'm looking at a wealth manager and I'm trying to figure out, how much time are they spending on something internally to do a particular thing or solve a particular problem or provide a particular service. I could say, oh, well, it costs this many people this much time, and then I can make a calculation on that, right? It could be revenue driven. And so sorry, actually the example here we have is around an AR product that we were building. So this AR product, we were looking at it as well as saying, okay, if we're helping with reducing the DSO 10 to 30%, and the cost of a 6% interest rate on whatever their total volume is, that's how much money we can add to their, essentially bottom line, which actually in this case ends up looking more like revenue to them, right? Then so that would be the same with any sales, marketing, kind of like any front end, tool or service. And then lastly, you could look at saving money. If they were fully outsourcing this to another agency, this accounts receivable function, they might spend, 40 grand to get this done. So from here, we've got a sense of, okay, well, what is the metric that we want to pin this against? And we can start to, price against, oh, we've got two data points that are similar, 36,000, 40,000. Okay, interesting. We can build from there because we know what they're spending today. All right. Aligning to the strategy. So there's really only three high-level strategies in pricing, or in pricing overall. The first one, and this comes from Simon and Kucher, there's cost plus, which is you basically take whatever it costs you to make a widget, and then you sell it with some margin, on top of it. Um, this is almost never used in software and tech, so it's not even an available strategy to us. The next one is competitor-based pricing. A lot of people use this. Oh, we're building, a verticalized note taker in this space, and all the other verticalized note takers charge per seat, and they all charge around $39 a month. How are we supposed to charge $400 a month if everybody else is at that price? It could be challenging, especially if you're taking that positioning of being a very similar product. As soon as you're competing with something directly in the positioning function, you need to know how much those other products are costing. And then the third is value-based pricing, which is how much value are you actually creating for the organization? And understanding the alternatives is a way of getting at the value. Number three is the strategy that we always suggest. That's, if possible, always aim for value and always try to differentiate. However, you also need to know the competitor's pricing, and that's the way of, kind of finding where are we the same and where are we different, and can we position ourselves as a different type of product that maybe has a higher price that is more aligned with the actual value created if you can quantify it, right? um, I'll share one more thing on this, which is just in terms of, we hunt deer, according to Christopher Jant's model, almost exclusively, in part because enterprise sales are too long. That's just part of our pricing strategy, because it fits with our market strategy. The sales cycles and the amount of capital that we put into a business just mean that we don't go there. We don't go B2C because we don't know how to do that type of business. It's not our specialty. So again, that kind of helps us with our pricing strategy, and then that changes the product strategy and the markets that we go into as well. So you can see how this price component touches so many other parts of the business. It just really gets stuck into it. Next piece, crafting a version 1 price model. There's a lot of different types of value metrics. And so the idea of a value metric, this is a term, again, from Price Intelligently. We saw the quote from, or at least I learned it from them initially, which is, what is the metric with which you're charging against? So is it per seat? And there's lots of examples of if it's my note taker is in the room here today. Well, that makes sense for it to be one seat for one team member, right? I don't want Cindy's note taker or notes from her meetings as much as I want my notes. And we could both be in a meeting at the same time. So we need two seats, or at least we could be sold on two seats, right? Per project, a data insights, research tools, things that almost run a one-off or create a sort of wall around something, can be really good. Per active customer, like a CRM, Slack uses this model, but it could also be, an agentic customer service tool. Hey, it's managing X number of clients, for you, as an example. Um, then, per usage credits, let's say we have a voice agent that's making calls for you. Well, do you want to base it based on the call, or do you want to price it based on the potential expense that you could be running up? It's a lot different. If it's a 1 minute call versus a 20-minute call in terms of your compute power that you're going to be running through, right? And so people are starting to understand where usage credits may apply. Um, or it could be an outcome driven, which is really, really powerful. If you can close a ticket, for me, um, that has a particular business value. So do it. If there's a lead, if you can go from zero to a lead, and that's an outcome that the customer is willing to pay for, if they hit a certain number of qualifications and you can do that, you could potentially capture much more of the value that way than you could if you just sold it to me per seat, right? So this is why this stuff really matters. It completely can change the dynamics of the business from being, a $5 million business to being a 50 or $100 million business, depending on this one choice. So again, it's very, very connected. The last piece is kicking the tires with customers. And there's these kind of four big questions that you want to ask them early on, almost before you present anything. So in an early solution validation stage, we ask the questions, um, what feels like it would just be way too much? Like this would be way too expensive a price. You'd never be able to afford it, and you never want to pay it because it would just be too much. And this needs to be tied to an outcome, and it needs to be tied to a solution that the customer kind of understands and is interested in. You just haven't talked about price with them yet. And they're going to tell you what feels expensive. And more importantly, they're going to tell you why. They're going to tell you because this ROI, because it's only worth this much to the business, because. And that's what you're listening for. The next thing is, and if they don't say because, you ask why, and you get to the why. The second would be, what would be too cheap? What would be so cheap as a product that you just wouldn't trust me? If I said, I'm going to give you uh, free flying lessons, it's like, I don't know if I should trust this Alan guy to give me these flying lessons. I don't think those should be free. That's too cheap for this. Whereas, a bargain. Hey, these flying lessons are this price. That's way cheaper than anywhere else I've seen. I know what the competitors are, or at least I know I'm going to be making this much money back. Therefore, it feels like a bargain. And you can see the psychology of how people's wheels will be turning, with this kind of thing. And next time you're looking at pricing, you can get yourself in this mindset, as well. Um, and then lastly, what feels so expensive that you're not happy about buying it, but you're still going to, because it's still worth it. Like it's just barely worth it. You're getting enough of an ROI turn off of this to make it worthwhile. Um, so when we ask those questions, it's about watching for reactions. Do they seem put off? Not just their words, asking why, and using these questions as ways of not just creating a statistical model, which can be good, and you can ask these in a survey. But I find if you ask them in a call, you're going to be able to actually learn a lot about how the customer is thinking about the value that you're planning to create for them. Um, and then lastly, if in the meeting that you have with them, if you can tell an ROI story based on all of the above, that's where, you know, you want to listen for objections where they say it's not actually worth that much, or I don't believe that. Maybe you need to change the story. Maybe it doesn't have that type of ROI. And you can adjust accordingly before you build too much packaging, around the product when you have these conversations early. Um, okay, so to kind of recap, and then we'll move on. Um, Patrick Campbell said the biggest pricing mistake startups make is thinking they're not ready to price yet. So you just kind of kick the can down the road. And I made this mistake. I picked a price out of thin air, on a SaaS product where, we built an iPad app first, and then we said, okay, well, let's just charge 10x what this thing is worth, or sorry, 10x the iPad app. We'll just charge 10x that as a subscription, because that was the best we could come up with, because we didn't think we really could figure out what the product was actually worth. So it wasn't that much money. It was more of like a token. And the amount of money that cost that business was, absolutely brutal in the long run in terms of really handicapping our growth, right? Um, so, I'll sort of, try to finish with that, pricing isn't really an afterthought. It's your business model in disguise. For us, we pair this with our early segmentation data to tell us if we even want to bother considering, a market before finding a solution if we can. At least high level, it needs to make sense. And we've all heard that, like I said before, a great founder in a bad market, can't beat a good founder, in a great market. So if we can control for it, why don't we just enter great markets that have the potential to price really well? So if you're going to price, you got to ask these questions. Do I know the size and the segments of my market? Do I know what customers already are paying to solve this problem? Do I know the cost of alternatives, solutions, products, or people? And can I connect my price to a clear outcome, some sort of ROI, or the value metric that is most tied to the delivery that I have, or the outcome that I have. And lastly, have I tested my early pricing ideas on 5 real customer conversations? Just throwing it out there, again, kicking the tires, asking these early questions and trying to create a defensible story. Those 5, it doesn't work out. Try it on the next 5. Try it on the next 5. So that's the stack. Segment your market, track the alternatives, align it to the strategy, craft the first version of the model, and kick the tires on real calls. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Learn to get your price, then price to learn, and then just keep the loop going as you develop this past version 1, which is what we're really trying to do here. So we'll pause there. Cindy, do we want to do some Q&A on this topic now, or share opinions on this if people want to share something in the chat room, or do we want to move on to the other stuff quick?
I think we'll keep Q&A to the end, but if people have stories, like share them in the chat and we'll definitely shout them out.
Okay, great. So let's jump into the next section. We'll tell you about some of the ideas we're working on. All right, I'll share a couple of these ideas with you, and the team's going to share a couple more. These are ventures we're building at the moment. We're building something in wealth advisory. I showed you the market sizing or market segmentation, for that early on. It's an idea we've been working on for a little while. An AI call center for contractors, an AI worker for freight communications, accounts receivable. I mentioned the AR, some of our learnings about AR earlier on. Hopefully trying to make this, specific for you guys, and autonomous penetration testing, security product there. There's also a product that we killed, and I think it's worth sharing why we didn't go into it, as a market. I'll share that for each one of these products, we're seeking a CEO, we're seeking customers, and we're seeking advisors. So customers to talk to about the product, and who might end up being an interesting early pilot customer, or just someone to talk to develop some of the questions that we've talked about, and anybody who's an advisor. So if you know someone who ran a company, who is from that space, if you're from one of these spaces, then it's probably worth talking about these later on. So let's talk about the specific ideas. I'll share about the wealth advisor. The big problem here, high level, is there's a massive advisory shortfall in the next 20 years. We talked to almost 50 wealth advisors. Personalization and productivity are impossible given their current workload. They spend over 80% of their time in meetings. That only gives them 20% of the time to actually do, wealth planning work, which is not enough, especially to do it personalized and proactively. The market's very healthy. 6 billion today, 12 billion by 2030. It's growing very well. And so that kind of tells us that, all right, there's an interesting problem here, and the market's big enough, and this is the right sort of framework for AI to jump in and solve. So we get excited about that. The next area that we're looking at is an AI call center for contractors. The problem, I talked to a very small plumbing company in a small market and asked them about how many calls they take per day. They're like, "Oh, we've got a full-time receptionist on this." I was like, "That's great." So I know how much they're paying, to answer calls. The second thing would be how many calls are you missing? And he said, "Well, she can only answer 1 call at a time." I was like, "Well, how many calls do you think you miss every day?" He's like, "We miss at least 3 or 4." I was like, "Well, what's the price of a call?" And you could just see just the panic set in, which was, wow, the average price of a call is $600. And so he's missing at least $1,800 a day in missed revenue due to unanswered calls. And this is a firm that's already paying to solve the problem. That's an existing solution that's well trodden and is not nearly good enough and costing them $1,800 a day, right? So the problem's very clear. And this isn't even a big company. This is a small company. Home services software, this whole space is growing very well. People seem to really like it. That does mean that there's a decent amount of competition here, but the idea of building a receptionist and a voice agent who can interact with all the, specific tools within a specific vertical is something that's gained a ton of traction recently. You can look up the market map of voice agents. We looked at it. It's insane. And at the same time, there's still a big opportunity here because nobody's really using them significantly yet. So there's plenty of potential land to grab, and seemingly customers who are interested in trying this out, they are not adverse to giving this a shot, despite the fact that we all do think talking to AI on the phone is still a little bit weird. So there's something very interesting about this idea that we're excited to continue to explore. All right, next one. And I'm going to pass this off to Iman.
Yeah, that's going to be me. Thank you, Alan. Just want to start by saying these pricing insights were incredible, Alan. Like I work with you every day on this, but still I've learned a lot today. So thank you. This opportunity, AI worker for freight communications. Let me start with what we kept hearing on the ground. Across the freight ecosystem, brokers, 3PLs, carriers, shippers, warehouses, everyone is saying the same thing. We are drowning in calls, texts, and emails we cannot get through. And teams' inboxes are overflowing, hundreds of emails and messages daily, and the phones never stop ringing. And this is not even strategic work, it's endless follow ups, reminders, status checks, and where's my truck pings. And when updates slip through the cracks, the costs hit really fast. This is OTIF penalties, chargebacks, and rebookings. And already thin margins in this industry get squeezed even more. And people describe it like running just to stay behind. That's really the heart of the problem we are going after here. The high frequency, high volume, high severity communications debt that steals time from the work that actually moves the freight and grows accounts. And to put some numbers behind this opportunity here, we are looking at a $26 billion market today just for the logistics PPO communications. That's money already being spent on people answering calls and emails. And the shift is underway. AI supply chain software is growing at 23% CAGR globally, which means budgets are already moving from headcount to automation. And in North America alone, we estimate around 200,000 potential customers just across brokers and 3PLs. 3PLs, by the way, for those who are not familiar with the term, is third-party logistics companies, and brokers are freight brokerage firms. So what's the opportunity here? Imagine an autonomous communication agent that takes the front line across phone, email, and SMS. It answers instantly, chases down shipment statuses and PODs, updates portals and TMS, and only loops in human when judgment or escalation is needed. So with that, you close loops faster, you keep customers informed, and cut the communications workload by up to 90% on targeted workflows. And over time, as these agents get smarter, being able to negotiate, schedule, and update independently, you start to see something bigger. You begin to compress the traditional broker role and enable a more direct shipper carrier relationship with humans focusing where they add real value, which is handling exceptions, building relationships, and growing accounts. So the next opportunity, pass to you, Cindy.
Thank you. Um, so this one's accounts receivable fintech AI. We mentioned a little bit when we looked at the pricing that this problem is actually really costly for finance team. It's so costly that it continues to be the top 5 priorities. It's either costing them $36,000 for in-house teams, $40,000 of outsourced team, and either of this price still give them a 50 to 90 day sales outstanding or DSO, or put in a different way, a 30 to 50% late payment for invoices. And this 30 to 50% late invoices is costing these teams a 6% working capital interest rate. And with all of these costs, um, really there's such huge market in the AR software. So there's this market is a $5 billion dollar market just in US alone, has a 12% CAGR, accelerated by really the AI adoption. And most importantly, there's an increasing CPA or accountant labor shortage. And the accountant labor shortage is driving the demand for just higher efficiency. And one of the ways that we find higher efficiency can be gained is through this autonomous AI agent that can handle the routine work in accounts receivable, specifically invoice reminders, whether that be through emails or through calling, reconciliation between invoice and cash received, and escalation for any issues that need coordination cross-functionally. For example, finance team, sales team, and customer success teams. And all of these functionality combined can then slash the day sales outstanding by 30%. But most importantly, freeing these finance teams who is experiencing this labor shortage for higher value work. And um, really enable them to change from being bogged down by this reactive action, routine work, and just constantly either emailing or calling to more proactive cash acceleration, driving liquidity, and enabling the humans to focus on customer experience rather than just following up. And next is autonomous penetration testing. So right now, early stage software, SaaS or startup teams are facing constant security scrutiny. We are now in a space where security is no longer optional, and you cannot delay until your firm is established enough before you then look at security. This is especially true for companies that are targeting highly regulated verticals like fintech and healthcare. And compliance frameworks like SOC 2 or HIPAA or PCI are expected even for companies at seed or Series A stage. But these companies can't afford 20K manual tests that take weeks and are outdated on delivery. Uh, as the company continues to grow and deploy new features, all the security gaps linger between those release cycles. But with AI, we can have the penetration testing happen continuously and at the speed of software development. So this market of continuous security testing represents around 1 billion TAM across 59,000 software startups that are experiencing this type of compliance pressure. They're usually companies that are selling to enterprise customers or highly regulated industries, as mentioned before. AI security tooling in this space is growing rapidly at 25% CAGR for development, security, and operations, or DevSecOps. And um, what's fascinating for us is one, these customers are highly price sensitive because we've seen it takes 20K, and then as a startup, cash is highly important. And embedding autonomous AI agents into this continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline enables them to turn costly audits into continuous assurance loops. And this is critical because for these industries, security and penetration testing is not a back office operation. It's actually a revenue driver and blocker. The fact that these companies are implementing rigorous security focus is actually what gives them assurance towards their customer and gives them that revenue back. Great. And this is the last company that we'll be showing. So Alan mentioned that we've killed this idea. But let's start first why we're excited. So vouching AI for audit. So auditors currently spend 60% of time on manual vouching or review. Vouching is this process where auditors look at invoices, leases, contracts, and just a bunch of documents to reconcile whether the um, economic reality that's reflected in those transactions are accurately captured in the financial data and are accurately matched to the company policy or the accounting policy. And this process uh, takes such a long time and bogs down employees, drives burnout, and limits client capacity, which is exacerbated by the fact that CPAs or accountants are experiencing a 17% workforce decline and a 33% drop in CPA exam candidates. That's the accreditation required. There is massive efficiency demands, and audit firms are looking to transition their current workforce into higher value tasks. This is a massive market with 30 billion revenue generated annually just in US alone. But it's highly concentrated in 4 audit firms, which is called the Big Four. That's EY, Deloitte, PwC, and KPMG. These guys hold 70% of the revenue. As we talk to audit leaders, they're really excited at the potential of AI to take away this very manual process of looking over the documents one by one and cut down that 60% of time by 20 to 30%. This would lift realization rates, which is how they track engagement profitability, and increase audit capacity, enabling them to audit more clients. But despite the strong user enthusiasm, we killed this idea because one, the market is heavily skewed towards the big 4 firms, which would require enterprise sales. And as Alan has brought up, FutureSight is specifically focused on B2B and not enterprise. Second, when we look at the competitors in the audit tech space, they're not exhibiting the level of growth that we're seeking. There's 0 to 12% growth with one outlier at 30% year on year growth. And this signals low adoption, which is then corroborated with what we found out through user interviews, where we find that these users kind of view this manual process as just a cost of doing business, and they're not actively seeking to automate that away. So without this clear wedge or scalable buyer base, we've decided to deprioritize this opportunity. And with that,
Deprioritize is like a very nice way of saying kill this opportunity, right? We're not going to do this. This isn't for us. If somebody else wants to do it, go ahead. But we don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah. So with that, I'm passing to Alan and opening the floor for Q&A. Alan, we have
Yeah.
so many interesting questions in the chat.
Okay, so maybe I'll scroll through and hit a few of those. Give me a second to scroll up a little bit. I noticed early on there's a question about the Okay, first question. Are there particular industries that are not viable? I was recently told that HR tech is tough because organizations are squeezing HR budgets and not prioritizing HR tech, slow to adopt. I have a couple comments on this. Mount Everest and K2 are almost the same height. Climbing one is way harder than the other. Is it possible to build a huge HR business? Of course it is. There's a bunch of them that already exist. And all businesses are tough. There's this J curve, that we see, which it starts with kind of like uninformed optimism. So when we first started looking at the wealth tech market, we're like, I've never seen a broke wealth advisor. These guys are going to have tons of money and they're just going to throw us at it, and we're going to get $100 million company in no time. And then you talk to a few of them and you realize that you were way over optimistic. Every one of these markets, is squeezed. Nobody's just so flush with cash and willing to throw it out the window. With that said, they're not all equal either. And, it could be true right now that HR is a tough market. We actually hold that belief internally as well. So without me just saying yes, the answer is, kind of yes. It's my opinion at least. Nick, you were asking about the TAM of, so that was for you, Samantha. Nick, you were asking about the TAM of the wealth tech product. It was the 6 billion. Iman, what number was that that we had on there? I feel like you'd know better than I.
For wealth tech, could you?
Yeah, it was that $6 billion number. Was that the TAM or like
26 billion
yeah,
for
maybe that
freight.
was it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm
No,
just missing
for
the
Wealth advisor.
yeah, wealth investors, 6 billion in 2025, 12 billion by 2030. Can't
Hmm.
remember that number where we
Let
got
me
it.
check. I can go back in 1 second to the market sizing and I'll reply in the comments.
Okay, thank you. John, I'm not sure if this is a question, but if you're interested in John's idea and buying shares in his idea, go for it. Message John. Veronica, you're on the hunt for a co-founder in B2B capital markets disruption, have built something. Yeah, if you're interested in that market, if anybody's, interested in that, message, Veronica. I don't know a lot about this market and, fintech stuff. It's kind of interesting. You could message us about it, Veronica. I don't think we're adverse to it. It may fit our market criteria. You know a little bit about what we're trying to build here and the general shape of a business. One thing we don't do is we don't do marketplaces. So if it's a two-sided thing, that's not something we do because it tends to just be very challenging and it takes a higher amount of capital. It doesn't mean that it can't be done or that those can't be great businesses. We're just priced out of participating in those opportunities. So no shade on those markets. It's just they're too expensive. Um, Ian, you asked if FutureSight also accepts outside ideas from founders who want to bring and work with the team in the studio model. Yes, so generally studios tend to work on these sort of like two levels, right? One is they either develop all of their internal ideas and then go recruit for them at different stages, either earlier or later, depending on the studio and their particular model. Some of them will spend a lot of money and get customers and build the entire product and then hire an EIR, or sorry, at that point, more of like a CIO. They're not even an entrepreneur in residence. They're just a CEO getting dropped into the business. Some studios like ours bring in partners much earlier and give them a bigger piece of the pie. That's just how our business is configured, and it aligns with our beliefs in terms of how we'd like to build businesses. The other way is to work with founders who have ideas already and have some sort of an expertise. So generally, if your idea connects to an area where you have a lot of experience and have essentially like a credible insight, I think there's this idea of believability from Ray Dalio and Bridgewater Capital or whatever that firm is. They focus on believability. Is this person have some reason to suggest that this is a great idea? If you have that believability in that market, then we'd be absolutely willing to talk about it. And I don't want to oversell. We do like the markets that we're identifying more than we like founder ideas. In part because of the way that we do our search, we believe is going to lead to higher potential markets. Just in general, we're more likely to hit a big idea there than we are the other way around. It doesn't mean, though, that we're not looking for great founders with great ideas. So the answer is, again, in lots of words, yes, kind of. Jason, you had a question around FutureSight working with competing or overlapping companies. You're in SMB. You're in SMB construction, and the AI call center is a small part of what we're building. As far as work with goes, probably not. It just ends up being it ends up being really tough to make those partnerships work. And as much as I am all for collaboration, the cost of that collaboration often at these stages in the really early days outweighs the value of that collaboration. Um, if the AI call center wasn't something that you were, actually building, and you could be a customer, for it, then of course there would be or like needed a pilot customer, or let's say you didn't want to build this and you wanted to integrate, this into your product, then that would be aligned with, oh, well, we're building something and you could be a consumer and a user and get value from it, within your platform. That would be more interesting to discuss. How long until the freight agent goes to market? Oof. we've got our targets. So generally, we try to take about 3 months to get a solution really developed and get some customers who are really interested in buying it. It might take a little bit longer to close the pilots, but once the pilots are closed, it would be about 3 months to deliver the pilot. Sometimes it goes longer. Hey, look, every timeline, like everything takes 3 times as long as we think it's going to take, right? We're not immune. You guys have all seen this in your own projects, I'm sure. 3 to 6 months, then let's say. So, could be, if we're saying to market, that means the general market, not just the initial pilot customers or design partners. We'd be talking more about, it could be 6 months from now, could be 9 months from now, if we're a little bit slower. Perry, how is FutureSight funded? What was your typical pre-seed check size? So we raised the fund from a bunch of angels and a couple of super angels and a couple of small institutions. Our last fund, we're raising our next fund right now. Our typical pre-seed check size is 250 grand with 100K follow-on after some stuff is checked. That values the business, I think, at around just under $3 million at that point. And Prathna could probably tell you more about this. Maybe I'll let Prathna answer this question down below, because it has more to do with capital and less to do with validation, which is my area here at the business. We've got, you're on the hunt for a technical co-founder. You've built 5 to 10K MRR. That's awesome. Congratulations. Getting that first bit of revenue is hard. So congratulations on that. Trying to figure out how to scale it and get the tech stack good. You're probably choosing the right time to do that, and you need more help getting the MVP built out. Message Veronica if you're a tech co-founder and interested in that. The $6 billion wealth tech market. Yep. There's the details from Iman. Christian, yeah, call it the pen testing can be challenging. When we look at this stuff, we look at it from the perspective of crowded. Is it because there's 10 competitors, or is it because everybody's already been sold to 50 times and has an existing solution? And when we're in our early stages and the pen testing project is at the earlier stage, as opposed to wealth advisory and the call center are further along, what we really look at is this idea of competitive density, and we do some work on that initially. And in our first calls to customers, when we're sharing ideas with them and they haven't seen anything like that and they're not buying anything like that, that usually is a signal to us that it's not too crowded. I can't say for the pen testing product if we've kind of figured that out or not, but it's a huge market, right? Like you could narrow in on one type of company or sell more horizontally. There's so much there, so we're interested in this space. It's also, I think there's something interesting about the pen testing market versus the cybersecurity defense market. It's easier to say, hey, I am testing for these problems at all points in time and make that promise and sell the idea that, yeah, there's always going to be outlier stuff and there's always going to be hackers who are ahead, but I can protect you against these threats or essentially test you against these threats. As a consumer of products like this in the past with previous software companies that I've run, being able to only do it a couple of times a year and it being extremely price prohibitive versus having ongoing testing is a really strong value proposition. I wish I could have had a product like that, and that's only available today based on how strong AI has gotten here. So there's still a lot of things to really like about this market, and we're really ruthless. Like, we kill a lot of ideas. If you knew how many ideas we kill, it's wild. And the fact that we haven't killed it yet, I appreciate all of your comments, and we haven't hit those red flags. And so appreciate the comments. We'll see as we get a little bit further in there. Samantha, thanks for joining us. Jason,
I'm so sorry. I have my
yeah.
hands raised here. I'm sorry. I don't know if you were
Hey,
seeing me. So
Marielle. I
hi.
didn't see you. No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. So I wrote in the chat, but I was like, I might jump in and ask before the call is ended. We have only 1 minute. So hi,
Sure.
my name is Mary O'Mara. I live in Montreal, Canada, Quebec, and I founded a marketplace, which I heard you guys don't work with, which is fine because I saw your ideas about the AI for call center for contractors, and it takes me to my heart because it's one of the problems that I'm trying to solve since 2023, and actually it's a problem that I live in since 2013. So it's something that I see a lot of potential and not a lot of action being taken on. And building an AI to help the call centers and always something that I have interested. All of that saying, I have some feedback from contractors. I have right now under my platform 106 providers, which I talk. I have some ideas about that, and I have some feedbacks as well, some opportunities that I would love to discuss further about this idea. If you guys have if you guys are open to, I don't know
Yeah,
what the next
let's
steps would be.
follow up. We
I
have your email address, so we'll send you an email and make a time to connect about the idea in detail. That would be great, Marielle.
That would be perfect. Yes. So talk
Thank
to you
you.
soon, guys. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was very great. Bye.
Yeah, thank you all. I'll share one last slide. I think we just want to share that we're doing this event here in Toronto next week. Cindy, do you want to jump to that slide? Sorry, not next week, end of the month. I want to draw your attention to this guy, Warren Rustand. Go watch a video of him online and get inspired and fired up to like go conquer the world. He is so awesome. I've seen him speak 3 times, and every time like he gives me goosebumps. I just like want to go conquer the world, and he's such an incredible individual. When I saw that he was coming to our event, I had to do a double take. I messaged Sean. I was like, we got Warren Rustand. What are we doing? Like, this is amazing. And yeah, for various reasons, he was able to come join us, and that is, just such a treat. So we're doing this here in Toronto. I think there's a way to apply for this, somewhere, Cindy, but if you're a potential investor, I think this is more of an investor and a demo day. But I wanted to just promote this and say this is something we're doing. Take a screenshot of the little button there over on the left, or the little QR code. And I think we're there. We're 1 minute late, but thanks everyone for joining. And just follow up with us via email. Cindy's email is here. She kind of like leads this thing. That's Cindy at FutureSight.ventures. And I think we've got some other stuff around there. Oh yeah, look, we're all here. Iman, Alan, Cindy. So send us a note, and appreciate you all. Thanks for spending an hour of your Wednesday with us, everyone. We'll see you next time.